Hello, I'm Paul Bearman, and this is Talking About The Who, a new podcast dedicated to that nice rock and roll band from Shepherd's Bush, London. "60 years on from first becoming The Who and Keith Moon joining the band, The Who's impact on the world is as strong today as it's ever been. And I'm a Who fan who wants to delve deeper into that legacy. But thankfully, this podcast isn't just a solo expedition. I'll also be having conversations about the band with special guests, many of them connected to The Who in some way. There's Irish Jack, a close friend of the band since the very beginning. Tony Fletcher, author of the mammoth Keith Moon biography, Dear Boy. Jody Linscott, who's been part of The Who's touring band on and off since 1989. Chris Charlesworth, melody maker, writer, author, and producer of the Who box set 30 Years of Maximum R&B. These are just some of the special guests you'll hear throughout Season 1 of Talking About The Who. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. And I hope you'll join me on this deep dive, this amazing journey, if you will. And together, maybe we can play a small part in helping to keep The Who's legacy alive for many years to come. Now you may be thinking, who are you? Well, before we get to my special guest for this first episode, Jody Linscott, I just want to take a moment to introduce myself and explain what's led to me making this podcast. As I said at the start, my name's Paul Bearman. I'm an amateur musician. I'm 44 years old. I was born in 1980 in East London, and I live in Luton, which is about 30 miles outside of London. Now, The Who have always been my favourite band. Thanks to my parents, I was exposed to music very early on in life. From the age of 2, I'd already started to like The Who and Jimi Hendrix. Other bands and artists I was drawn to during childhood included the Beatles, Cream, AC/DC, Eddie Grant and Musical Youth. Those last two haven't followed me into adulthood in quite the same way as the others, but a spark was well and truly lit during those formative years. I don't know if it was the visual element or the actual music itself. I think there was just something about seeing people sing and play musical instruments that really struck a chord, if you'll pardon the pun. While other kids my age were getting toys and teddy bears as presents, I'd get cassettes and records. That included quite a lot of Who greatest hits imports, but if a record had The Who on it, I was happy, and I still own those records today. My mum would also label a lot of my childhood presents as being from either Pete Townshend or Jimi Hendrix. When I was 5 and Live Aid was going on, I asked why Hendrix wasn't part of it. My mum had to break the news to me. As I've got older, my musical tastes have really widened, but I'd say it's classic rock and some of those big 60s bands that forms the foundation for those tastes. So The Who have been my favourite band for 40 plus years. However, there's still a lot of gaps in my Who knowledge, and there's undoubtedly bigger Who fans than me out there. I'm not someone who's ever set out to see them live every time they've toured near me. I've only seen them live 6 times. The first time was when I was 16, at Hyde Park in London in 1996, when they played the whole of Quadrophenia. The most recent gig was Sandringham in August last year. Off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you how every song on It's Hard goes. And I'm not a massive collector of merchandise or bootlegs or anything like that. Having said all that, I reckon if I was on the BBC quiz show Mastermind and The Who were my specialised subject, I'd get a good score. And I do feel a connection with The Who that I've never felt with any other band or artist, not even Musical Youth. The Who will always be my favourite band, but aside from being a Who fan, what else has led to me making this podcast? Well, in 2020, while all that fun COVID stuff was going on, I ended up in hospital with a very high temperature. It wasn't anything to do with COVID, but I was diagnosed with a condition called chronic lymphocytic leukemia, or CLL for short. In other words, blood cancer. If you're familiar with Mike Peters from the band The Alarm, he's got the same condition as me. I was told that CLL is the sort of illness that old people get, and to get it at my age is very rare. I've had chemotherapy for my old person disease, and even though I've been told I can never be fully cured, and despite having a crap immune system and low energy levels, everything is currently stable. Now you won't be surprised to hear that finding out you've got this kind of illness does make you take a good hard look at your life. For me personally, I wanted to make positive changes, so I took some time to figure out exactly what I wanted to do with my life and try and turn this negative situation into a positive one. One thing I decided I wanted to do was try my hand at podcasting. So despite being a generally shy and insecure sort of bloke, I have been used to putting myself out there as a musician. I also used to host an online radio show back in the day, and I've done some writing and bits of editing as part of my previous job. So I thought all these things combined would work in my favour when it came to making a podcast. I then decided I wanted to make a podcast about The Who, and there's three main reasons why. Number one, I generally enjoy talking about them. Number two, it's a chance to plug those gaps in my Who knowledge by taking my own personal deep dive into the band. And number three, I don't think anyone else is making a Who podcast, at least that I'm aware of. There was one season of the podcast Discography, hosted by a musician called Mark with a C, that was dedicated to The Who. And there's also a YouTube channel called The Fisher Protocol, and I highly recommend checking both of those out. But those two things aside, I'm not aware of any Who podcasts, so I've decided to make one. That brings us up to this first episode you're now listening to, and it's at this point that I'll introduce today's special guest, Jody Linscott. So who is Jody Linscott? Jody is a percussionist. She's played with everyone. Seriously, just look at her Wikipedia page. She really has played with everyone. And that includes The Who. She first played with them on the 1989 tour when the lineup had expanded to include not only percussion, but also a horn section, a second guitarist, and backing singers. She played with The Who again when they toured Quadrophenia in the mid-90s, and she was also part of the band for the acoustic gigs they did in London in 2020 and 2022. She's played on Pete Townshend's solo albums and toured with him various times, including as part of Deep End, the band he put together in the mid-80s. And she's also toured with Roger Daltrey as part of his solo band, the most recent tour being in June this year. I spoke to Jody over the phone in October. There was plenty of Who chat, but we also talked about how Jody first became a musician and the early days of her career. And so, without any further ado, here's my conversation with Jody Linscott. Can I ask about when your career started? When did you first start playing a musical instrument?
I think it was like 1973. Yes, I believe it was 1970, something like that. 73 or 74. I think it was 73 though.
And from what I've seen, it was quite an interesting story behind how you got started. Is it something to do with you working in a repair shop and someone coming in with a conga that needed fixing?
I didn't work in a repair shop. I was squatting, actually.
Oh.
When I first got to this country, I was squatting in Camden Town. And, somebody brought me a little conga that was all beat up and broken. It had a split in it, and the head was split, and asked me if I could fix it because I was handy and, I'd make a little extra cash that way. And I did fix it, but he never came to get it, so it was just there in the corner, and I never played it or anything. It didn't occur to me. But I was walking in Covent Garden, and there was a poster at the Africa Center, which was a cultural place where they had all kinds of cultural events. And this particular time, they were having a master drummer from Ghana teaching, and it said, starting at 7:30, if you've got anything, you could bring it in. I thought, well, I could bring that little drum. I didn't expect what happened next to happen, but Mustafa Teteyati was a very tall Ghanaian man who was the eldest of 35 brothers and sisters, and he had, I believe, 10 mothers, I'm sure that's what he said, and one father, and his father was a shaman, and passed down all of his medicinal and healing and, things to Mustafa, and that involved a lot of instruments. Anyway, so there was probably about 30 people here, and we were all in a semicircle. He had like 5 or 6 drums, Ghanaian, old-fashioned, you have to bang in a hammer, the wooden pegs to make the skin tighter to go up in pitch or whatever, and the hair and around the skin, and just like wild. And he was amazing. He was like mesmerizing. Anyway, he was playing this rhythm, and I was tapping on my little drum, but I kind of lost in the moment. I didn't even realize I was doing that. And he came up to me and wondered how I knew what rhythm to play with his rhythm, which I didn't know. I didn't know what I was doing. I still don't know what I was doing, but I must have just really tapped into his thing. Anyway, he just asked me if he could teach me, on a Sunday, every Sunday, for like an hour. And I said, yeah. And that's how it started, because I wouldn't have ever picked up a conga if it hadn't been for that poster. Anyway, I went along to the first Sunday, and he would hug me, but not in a sexual way at all. He would just hug me and beat a rhythm onto my back, and for about a minute or more, until it was like beaten into my system, and then he'd sit me down, and I could play it on the drum. That's how he used to do it. I thought that was so brilliant. And then he'd after we did that, he'd cook a typical Ghanaian meal, and we'd eat on the floor, and then I'd go home. And I did that 3 times. It was extraordinary. So then I made my own congas, because I couldn't really afford any. But I had a friend who used to make stuff at BBC, like butter that didn't melt for commercials and stuff like that. He was really good at it. And he showed me how to make a pair of congas, which I did. And they were really good congas. They're actually the congas that are on the every Lynn drum machine.
Oh, wow.
But anyway, that's another story. And I kept the congas in the cloakroom of Dingwalls, because Dingwalls had just opened, and I helped paint it. And then I became a waitress, and I kept my congas in the cloakroom and just jammed with the band. This would have been in 74. And a band called Kokomo came in, and they were fantastic. And I took my time off on, nobody seemed to mind that I would lug my congas on stage and play with them. Back in those days, it was much more open. Anyway, I played with them all night long, and I got fired from Dingwalls, and then Kokomo kind of hired me. And then they got a big deal, and we went on tour in America, did a record, and it all happened as quickly as that.
Yeah, I must be honest, I'd never heard of Kokomo until probably a week or so ago, but I've been listening to that first album, and I've really been enjoying it.
Yeah, they were actually they got together because everybody was out of work at that same time, and they were kind of looking for something to do. And so, everybody would call who they knew to see if they were around, and put some songs together and played at Dingwalls. So the saxophone player was with King Crimson, Jim Mullen that was playing with Brian Auger and people like that, and then Tony O'Malley was playing with 10cc. It was like that kind of a thing. And Neil Hubbard and Alan Spenner were from Joe Cocker's band, and they were fabulous musicians.
Yeah.
And then there was me, and I was just starting, but that is where the luck is, because when you get to play with people that are so much better than you, boy, do you have to rise to the occasion.
And I guess a good way to describe that first Kokomo album is kind of a soul funk sound. Do you think that's accurate?
Yeah, soul funk. Yeah, that's how I would describe it. Their influences were Aretha Franklin, Marvin Gaye, all the kind of Tower Power, or just all the funk bands. So it was a great band. Still going. We're still doing gigs. We did one last month.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and we sell out every time.
Oh, that's really good. That's really good to hear.
Yeah.
So when you were working at Dingwalls, how would it work then with you jamming with other bands? Would it be a case of you going up to them saying, "Hey, can I come and sit in with? I've got some congas out the back," or did they get to know you and they'd invite you on stage? How did it work?
Well, I just say that. Do you mind if I wouldn't have a microphone or anything, very rarely. Do you mind if I play? There was just it was so open. Everybody, there was often people that would come and sing and take a song, or, maybe a friend of the drummer's bass player friend was there and they might sit in, and, it was like that. It was just more jam oriented, and it wasn't like a polished, some bands came in that were polished, finished bands that just didn't want anything but themselves up there. But a lot of times, people would say, yeah, why not?
Yeah, that's great. I can't help but think if that guy had actually come back and picked up his conga that you'd repaired, your life could have turned out very, very differently.
It would have, yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? That's always interesting. Would you have ended up doing the same thing but taking a different road to it, or would you have done something completely different? It's difficult to know whether it's a fated thing that you do, and that no matter how you would always get to that thing, or, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe in an alternative reality, it's probably that guy who's getting hit on the back by Mustafa and got that rhythm beaten into him instead of you. But yeah, we can only wonder. Did you come from a musical family originally?
Well, musical in the sense of music loving, yes,
yeah.
Definitely. My dad had a huge jazz collection of 78s, and he knew a lot of him and my mother were used to go to all the jazz clubs, and they would have like Count Basie's band would come over and hang out at the house, and my brother's godfather was Vic Dickinson, who was Count Basie's trombone player, and they knew a lot of people. My father played a little bit of guitar, but they were just fans, and they were intelligent fans, so bands used to love them, and they used to love going to gigs. So they had a very interesting record collection. As I said, Papa's was a lot of jazz stuff, but he also loved nature, and so he would have whale call albums and bird call albums, and his father was when he went to Africa, he visited Africa, he brought back albums of pygmies singing in some little tiny village in Africa. So there was like all kinds of different comedy albums, every kind of thing you could think of. So the record collection was really interesting and really great for us kids, me and my brother. And then my brother, he was a musician, and he was a much better musician than me. He was a guitarist, really ahead of his time. So many people took his ideas and became successful, and he was very unlucky. He never did. He was right at the brink of success. But anyway, he was a great record collector, and when I was little, he had he discovered Prince before, like 10 years before anybody heard of him, and he would find all these amazing things, and he had a fantastic record collection. So yeah, there was always something playing in our house. So, and I hear it in my, being a percussionist. That includes things like bird whistles. I know directly how come I would want to play a bird whistle. It's because of my upbringing. And I love sound effects, ocean drums and thunder things and all the weird percussion things that you can get, because we had those sounds all the time going on in the house.
Yeah, from hearing about that record collection, I can totally see why music came quite easily to you when you started playing it yourself, because you must have been exposed to so much different types of music. I remember my dad saying to me when I was quite young and learning to play drums, he said the more music you listen to, the better musician you become. And I guess it kind of maybe became ingrained in you during that childhood, listening to all those different sounds and everything else.
Yeah, I guess so. Some people Yeah, some people, they like one kind of music, even from a little kid, and that's what they do. And they usually become virtuosos if they decide to, be a jazz saxophone player or something, because they've always known that that's what they want to do. But that wasn't the case with me. I didn't have, I was just, I loved it all. So I'm more of a jack of all trades than a master of anything, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, sure. I think that's the best way to be. I mean, I couldn't even imagine being into one type of music or even wanting to play one type of music. That's just so alien to me.
Yeah, but I respect it though, because people like that, they just take it so deeply. They get in so deep with something, and it's amazing. And sometimes I wish I could be that way.
Yeah, I can see that. Let's talk about The Who, if that's okay.
Yep.
Were you a fan of The Who before you ended up playing with them?
No. I mean, yes, because Jeff, my brother, had Who records, and yeah, it was great. But I wasn't like a huge fan. Um, I like them, but I didn't really know that much about all their music. So, no, I wouldn't say a big fan. I became a fan when I started working with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you remember what the first thing you would have ever heard by The Who was, and how old you would have been?
Well, it might have been something like My Generation. And I won't tell you how old I was because...
No, that's okay.
But I love that song. I mean, that was a great song. It was a big hit. I was still in America then. I didn't come to England until 1971. So, yeah, it probably would have been that. Or I Could See for Miles. Some of those songs.
Yeah. When did you first meet anyone from the band?
Well, I was playing with a guy called Robert Palmer. Do you remember him?
Yeah.
And I was in his band, so I was on Sneak and Sally, Through the Alley, that album, and also Some People Can Do What They Like, which is his third album. And we toured in between. And we had been playing at the Roxy in L.A., and somebody, I can't remember who it was, somebody came up to me and said, "Oh, Pete Townshend's looking for you." He must have been a friend of Pete's. And it might have been, I don't know who it was, but anyway. So I was like, oh, okay. Anyway, I don't know how long after that, maybe 6 months after that, I was in New York City, and I was about to see The Wall by Pink Floyd, and Pete was at the bar. I saw him at the bar, and I went, "Oh, that's Pete Townsend." So I tapped him on the shoulder, and I said, "Hi, are you looking for me?" And he said, I've been looking for you. And so that's how I met him. And he was thinking of getting a band of his own together, which he did about a year later, called The Deep End. And we would, just talking about that and just getting to know each other, and what my ideas would be if he was to get a band, and, just banging stuff back and forth about stuff like that. And then one day he called and he said, "Right, I've got the band. Let's go." So we went into rehearsals and we did a few gigs, and it was a great band, really good band. So he was doing that kind of thing. The Who had taken a break, and Pete was interested in doing his own thing. He had a few albums out. I did Chinese Eyes with him. And then I've heard that, the Who were getting back together to do a reunion tour in 1989. And they didn't really want to do it, or at least Pete didn't really want to do it. But I think John Entwistle needed the money for, he had a lot of alimony or something like that. I don't know. And So they agreed to do it, but Pete said to the rest of them, "I'm not doing it unless I can use my, band, like Simon Phillips on drums." And I was included, thank God, because that was really fun. We did a stadium tour in America in 1989, and he used the brass from his band, so he had like 4 brass players, 3 backing singers, and me. I think were the additions. There might have been, and an extra guitarist. So that was great. And that was my first time where I met Roger. I hadn't met him. So that was but that was 10 years after I met Pete. 9 years, actually, after I met Pete. Because I met Pete, I think, in 1980 or 79 or 80. And then I was asked to do other things with them for quite a while. So it was great, really great.
Yeah, speaking of All the Best Cowboys Have Chinese Eyes, I've been listening to that recently, and Slit Skirts is my song of the moment. That's just such a great song.
So good.
I'm guessing you played on that.
Yeah. I mean, I have to tell you, though, we did a version of that didn't make the album with Simon Phillips and me and Pete, and I think it might have been just the 3 of us. And I can't remember who else was there, if anybody, maybe bass, there must have been a bass player, but I can't remember who. And that was a great version. I always was sad that didn't make the album. But yeah, it's a cracker. I mean, Pete has just written such good songs. I mean, really. Rough Boys is my favorite.
Oh, good choice.
Yeah. We did that song with Deep End. Really thrilling.
Yeah, my main takeaway from watching some of those Deep End gigs is it just looks like it's so much fun playing those songs, and that big band sound. Well, I guess not a big band as in the sense of like an orchestra, but
it was
a lot of musicians. It just looks like you're having the time of your life playing those songs. Like every member is just loving it.
I know, it was really good. Well, it was like, I mean, the way I remember, when Pete and I were talking about what kind of a thing to put together, I totally said, look, I think you should get a really big band, because then you can just do something with one member, or you could have it like this huge sound. And he was kind of saying the same thing. And I'm really glad that he did that, because and he had Dave Gilmour in guitar. I mean,
yeah, that's it.
Simon Phillips just mashed it. It was so exciting. We could do anything. And then he'd do like just a song with Peter Hope Evans, the harmonica player, just him. And he had so much scope because he could do whatever he wanted because he had the facility. So, yeah, it was a corker.
Did it feel similar playing with The Who on that 1989 tour? Because it was a lot of the Deep End band. Did it have a similar sort of vibe?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. I think some people were like upset because some people are purists and they think, oh, I don't want to see The Who with anybody with 4 people, 5 people on stage. That's always going to happen, People don't like a variation on things, fans. I'm speaking about fans, but a lot of people just loved it because it had a gigantic sound, and Pete's writing is so proficient and so versatile. Every song you can orchestrate it so easily, and so to have a band like that with horns, and it was just thrilling. I mean, everybody that I knew loved it.
Yeah, and I think with The Who's music, and you say about some fans don't like the fact that there were extra musicians, and I guess they're doing a similar thing nowadays, playing with an orchestra. But I think you have to bear in mind that The Who's music really does suit an orchestra, and I think it really suits having extra musicians playing it. It's just something about it, I think.
Yeah, totally suits it. And, also, they've been doing this for a long time, and They should be able to just go out and do it any way they want. I mean, when Roger's great for that, especially because when we did the tour in the summer, we're still doing like 5 or 6 Who songs. Won't Get Fooled Again. We've done that song acoustically with me playing a box. It's like Roger's very happy to just rethink things completely and to really go out on a limb and give things a try and to give it a different twist. And it always works. We always find a way to make Pete's songs work because Pete's songs are so beautifully written, and so there's so much scope to every song he writes to play it so many different ways. You could do a reggae version, it would sound great.
So speaking of the summer tour with Roger, how did that compare to previous tours you've done with The Who?
Well, the Who tours were always large, and we were doing sheds, which is kind of where you're undercover, like in a shell or some kind of stage that has covering, but there's indoor seats, but then it goes beyond that, and people are sitting on the lawns. There's no walls or anything, and then people are picnicking all around on the grounds. And that's what we did, mostly sheds. And then we'd play venues like the Palladium, which has maybe, it's a theater, big theater and stuff like that. The Who never did that. They play big places. To me, it's everything. It's as exciting one way as it is the other way, because it doesn't matter how extravagant the tour is. If you're playing the music and it sounds great and the arrangements are great and everything is cool and you love who you're playing with, it's as exciting to play in a stadium as it is to play in a little club, as it is to play in somebody's backyard. It doesn't matter where you are.
And I can imagine for Roger, it probably made a nice change to be playing those smaller venues and to, I guess, experiment a little bit more than he normally would with The Who, and just maybe be a bit looser with the material, if you like. And
yes, it was, and especially because we didn't use synthesizers, so we had no do 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 do, none of that stuff. We couldn't have any sequences or anything like that. So we had to do it with musical instruments, like Garant would play keyboard parts and do it like a sequence thing, and Katie, the violinist, would be, we just have to work it out without all that stuff. So he wasn't bound by programs of any kind. And so, and that was really great, actually. It was great for him, and he loves that because it just takes the pressure off. Whereas with The Who, he's got to really, it's always a big show, and it's much more strenuous also for him. But in this tour, it was very relaxing, and he was choosing all kinds of music to play on his tour from other bands and other, like we did Boy in a Bubble, which is Paul Simon's song, which you would never think of Roger Daltrey doing Boy in the Bubble. But we did this great version. He had this idea, and we rehearsed it, and it worked out, and it was great, and he does a lot of stuff like that, which is why I love playing with him. And also, he's not afraid of mistakes, or if we screw it up at the start, we'll stop and start again. And the crowd, or if he forgets a lyric or whatever. So that makes it really fun, and people love coming to his shows because it's so personal. You feel like you're watching art in the making instead of a fine-tuned thing, if you see what I mean. It's more rough and ready, and but everybody's nailing it.
Yeah.
So it's great. I really respect him for that. Love that.
Yeah, totally. And I think for people going to those sort of gigs where it kind of is on you're on the seat of your pants, not quite knowing how it's going to go. But I think that makes it more memorable for someone going to see a show like that.
It does, and often, fantastic things come of it. If you, because you're not in your head, you're on your instincts and your musicality. You just gotta work it out as it's coming. I mean, we are a bit more rehearsed than that, and of course, the last shows were probably better than the first shows of a tour, but it's fun.
Yeah, I can well imagine. And the thing about Roger as well, he's now 80 years old, and the fact, I mean, he still sounds fantastic. But the thing that really gets me is a song like Barbara O'Reilly, where he hasn't even changed the original key, and he can still belt it out.
He's actually singing better. In all the years I've known him, he is singing better now than he's ever sang. He's incredible. He had gotten some treatment from a doctor who had some kind of new idea. He had a problem with his throat at some point, and the doctor fixed him to the point where he repaired him completely. And it's amazing. It's just fantastic.
Yeah, it's not even as if he's trying to sound like he used to. He's you can tell he's changed the way he sings, but it still works, and he hasn't had to change any keys at all or anything. It's just incredible.
I know, and he's still got the same power in his voice, if not more, which is very, not easy for any 80-year-old to, usually there's wear and tear and tuning problems. Roger has none of that. He is on fire.
Yeah, so, I think I'm right in saying he's never had any formal musical training or anything like that.
Yeah, I don't think he has, no. I think he was a welder or something.
It's probably singing in a factory helped. What was it like playing the acoustic gigs with The Who in 2020, just before the whole COVID lockdown thing? Because that was in a tiny venue in London. That must have been very, very different from some of the stadium gigs you've done with The Who in the past.
Yes. Do you know what? We didn't have any rehearsal for that. Not one. We had one sound check, and we didn't even run through everything. And it was fantastic. It was what was the name of that place?
Is it Prism?
It was the Prism. That's it. And they had played there 50 years before, so it was like the 50-year thing. And the office kind of set it up and said, "By the way, you're doing this little gig at Prism," and everybody was like, "Oh," and so it was really impromptu, and it was fantastic. It was such a great gig, because Roger and Pete were just so loquacious. They were talking and telling stories and laughing and joking, and the audience they were hard-bitten 50-year-old fans in that audience, and every one of them just loved it. It was a real departure from The Who, but we did all those Who songs, and we had Pete's brother Simon Townshend on guitar, and we did a couple of his songs. But the banter, it was like great. They had a really good time. I think they really enjoyed it. We did 2 nights of 2 shows a night, and they weren't really long shows. It might have been an hour or something, but it was an experiment, and it was a good one.
Yeah, those gigs must have been incredible, and I think The Who, unrehearsed and experimenting, is probably always worth seeing.
Yes. I mean, we've done a few of those since, and they've gotten much better, because I've gotten much better at the idea of having to play a box with not having a drummer, because it was scary as hell, that idea at first. But, yeah, we did some stuff at the Albert Hall like that, at Roger, they have that charity, Teenage Cancer Trust, which is a wonderful charity where they build extensions in hospitals for teenagers to be together when they have cancer, instead of being isolated in wards with everybody who is really old, or, you know what I mean? So they have each other to hang with while they go through this their treatments, and it's such an awful time for these kids, and it's wonderful. And they book, I think, 5 or 6 nights at the Albert Hall every year, and the Who have been playing there, and with a whole bunch of other artists, all kinds of people they get to play, and it's wonderful. And we've done that 2 or 3 times as an acoustic Who band with Pete, and it's really gone down well.
Yeah, so, I could just imagine they must have been such fun gigs to play.
Yeah, really nice. I love it. Actually, I love it. I think it sounds great. It's interesting. It's different. It's innovative, and it's wacky.
Yeah, totally. And I guess we were saying earlier that a big band, as in big in size, suits the Who's music, but I think stripping it down to an acoustic set works just as well.
It does, and he could, Pete could strip it down and just do it by himself, and it would sound great because he has that kind of guitar playing, and he sounds, he'll be so dynamic when he does anything by himself. Or, at the end of those shows, him and Roger by themselves did Who Won't Get Fooled Again. And it was just Pete strumming, but it sounded huge. So another testimony to the writing.
And there we have it, my conversation with Jody Linscott from October this year. I love Jody's positivity, and she obviously loves what she does, which is quite infectious, I think. She was genuinely lovely and kind-hearted and generous, and it was a real pleasure to speak to her. If you'd like to hear more of my conversation with Jody, head over to patreon.com/talkingaboutthewho, where you could become a supporter of this podcast. That means that not only will you be helping us to make more episodes, but you could also have access to semi-regular bits of bonus content during this first season and beyond. patreon.com/talkingaboutthewho. You can also help support us with a one-off donation at buymeacoffee.com/talkingaboutthewho. And that's it for this episode. I'll see you again in 2 weeks' time. Until then, thank you for listening, look after yourselves, and as Roger Daltrey always says, be lucky. Goodbye.